So, algorithms of the heart. This is not going to be a technical talk, so if that's what you're expecting, I'll apologize right now. This is the question that we're addressing. Let's see if we can get this to work. Yeah. Can you build an algorithm to support or influence or inspire an emotional decision? I got this quote yesterday morning, the one below that. The heart has no master despite what reason may think. It's interesting. A lot of people, when we talk about this subject in this field, consider emotions and aspects of the heart something pretty difficult to predict, something pretty difficult to work with from an algorithmic perspective. But we've actually built one. What you're seeing there is real data. This is an algorithm that we have built, or actually it's a set of algorithms that can determine what you as an individual care about. It primarily looks at you and understands what causes you're interested in, which people you want to support, and what difference you yourself want to make in the world today. The thing is, when we think about data, though, in most cases, especially in this big data world, we primarily look at it to try and understand consumers. We're looking for transactional behavior, trying to optimize existing business processes and so forth. And these can be very more rational decisions rather than, emotional type ones. And so we come back to that same question. If that's what the biggest use of big data for, the slide that I showed previously, how do we then start using it for more emotional things, emotional decisions? So I'll take you through a little bit of a journey that we went through in order to build that algorithm that we showed earlier, and I'll talk in a bit more detail about that. So the first thing we started investigating was we had to understand the context of the way we think and how we make these decisions. It was clearly a left brain, right brain issue. We started looking at the aspects of the left brain and how that contributes to our decision making, and where the softer aspects are, music, sports, things that you care about, and dug into that a little deeper. And what was interesting was actually if you look at it this way, with all the things that the right brain is for, you can see that there are algorithms that actually exist already that begin to support some of our decisions in that space. Spotify, Netflix. So what was comforting for us was that there's some of this already in existence, but it will require us to be a little creative in our use of data. In addition, there was a lot of supporting research, a lot of supporting papers that have been put out there by the academic community. If you've come across Dan Ariely, he talks about some of our more irrational decisions that we make. And what's great is he says that's predictable. And if you look at some of the information that he puts down in his book, it really supports this idea that even the emotional aspect, the emotional decisions we make, they also have a certain degree of predictability, a pretty strong degree of predictability, in fact. And so the slides have now got stuck, so apologies for the technical issue. What also got exciting for us was we started to obsess about the amount of data that we can collect. We started looking for data from all sorts of different places. And what we didn't really take time to sit down and think about was that a lot of the data that's being created is created by us, by human beings. And in addition, most of that data comes with additional information such as the date and timestamp, as well as the geolocation. Combine that with environmental data of what was happening, you essentially have this laboratory of information, laboratory of human behavior. So take the concepts that Dan Ariely or all of that research has talked about how we make emotional decisions, how we choose partners, how we decide what to eat and when we crave something, and take all the data that we are creating. Suddenly you have enough information to start making those things real, to start building algorithms to predict some of that behavior. Apologies, guys, but these slides seem to be a bit stuck. I've jumped one slide, but we'll carry on. Ethics becomes a really important thing. If you can imagine you have all of this power at your hands, you have the ability to influence, ability to inspire, somebody to make an emotional decision, you can, because it's predictable, you can put an equation around it. So if you can predict what somebody is going to care about, who they're going to care about, you also have the ability to influence them. You have the ability to inspire them. You have the ability to take out any barriers to that particular decision. And if you have that ability using data, then ethics becomes absolutely essential. And so I'll now talk a little bit about the organization where we've actually built this algorithm. So we work for an organization called Just Giving. We're the world's largest social giving platform. And we've been around since about 2001, have about 23 million users. We're based in the UK, 23 million users from all over the world. We've raised $3 billion for charities, for good causes out there. And we work in about 8 different currencies, and we have in excess of 20,000 charities that work with us. But causes are all over the world. So a charity may be based in the UK, but it does something for children in Uganda, for example. So that's looking at it from a cause perspective, then rather than isolating it purely as a charity. Our mission is to make sure that every cause gets the funding that it requires. And that's a pretty big ambition. You know, we've only raised 3 billion for good causes, but we can raise significantly more. There's about 1.4 billion people on this earth that are willing to give and are ready to give. They have things that they're passionate about and things that they care about. But they've developed some of these barriers, institutional barriers, that have stopped them to make that decision, that impairs that decision for you to contribute. And so the way our product works, essentially, the typical use is you get a life event, something happens. Let's say somebody gets afflicted with a certain condition in your family, your great-grandfather perhaps. And then you would decide to go and create a fundraising page. People do all sorts of things when they're fundraising, and then they share that page to their friends, and their friends come and support them by making a donation. That's the way the product works, for those who don't know what Just Giving is. And fundraising is changing. Of course, you had the big ice bucket challenge that took place a lot last year, but we're also seeing people who, when they're getting married, at their wedding, and they would ask their guests, instead of providing gifts, why don't you donate to this charity, because it's passionate, they were passionate about it. You have that Tony the Fridge who was running with a fridge on his back to support cancer. And then also people are doing that for their birthdays as well. So fundraising as a concept is changing. The way we are doing things to raise awareness and to raise money for the causes that we care about has moved on. Unfortunately, giving itself hasn't made that same sort of transition. It's still very transactional. You give to someone or you give to a cause and then you disappear. We don't get to engage, we don't get to get passionate and really show the things we care about to other individuals and really get inspired by those things. It's still extremely transactional. Whereas all other industries have made that move. They've made that shift from being transactional to engaging. The telephone, you only interacted it with 2 reasons, was when it was ringing or you needed to call someone. But now people are on their phones every day. There's a few people at the back that are still on their phone at the moment. But with that ambitious cause that we're trying to address, this ambitious goal of making sure every good cause should get the funding that it requires, we're going to have to do things a little bit differently. We need to be personal. So that's the first thing that's quite clear. We already live in a personalized world. Everything is designed for us, but we need to be specifically personal to you. We need to understand, for you as an individual, what is it you care about at that particular time. And one of the challenges we came across when we were doing this is we found the thing that we care about isn't static. It changes. Today you may care about something because of what your grandfather went through, but then you might get to work and meet a colleague who, let's say, suffered from a brain hemorrhage or something like that, and then you get to know the charity that looked after him. Now you get exposed, you've gone through discovery, you found out about a new cause, and this is your opportunity now to learn about something new, and now you might care about something else. So it moves, it changes, which is why you saw that graph earlier. It's not static. That was a static image, but that moves and that changes. So we tried the traditional methods. In some of the talks, I've seen a lot of people talk about RFM, segmentation, collaborative filtering, so some of the more advanced techniques. None of those really work in this space. And I'll explain why. Let's take collaborative filtering, for example, that looks at the behavior of certain groups of users, groups them together, and for those that are missing certain transactions, it'll then decide that those are the sort of transactions we should recommend to that individual. Imagine a space where you care about cancer or you care about feeding the hungry. There is nothing about you, just because you belong to a particular segment, doesn't mean that everybody in that segment cares about the same thing. You could be born in London, go to a really good school, you're white, middle class, aged between 25 and 35, and you care about cancer, doesn't mean that everybody else in that segment also cares about the same thing. And also, a group of people who care about cancer and then go on to care about something else doesn't mean that because you care about cancer, you're also going to go and care about that same thing. So things like collaborative filters really, really do not work. They're not effective. I should take that back, actually. They do work. They're better than random, but they won't allow us to make the goals that the ambitious goals that we've put forward. So we tried quite a few of those. So again, we had to think out the box. And remember when we talked about the laboratory of human behavior? This is where we started to make some serious gains. We went back and said, let's look at the decision-making process. Let's look at the brain. Let's look at all the things that affect our decision process. And we came across some really interesting findings. So first of all, nature versus nurture. When you're building a product or an algorithm for behavior change, it's fantastic if it's a natural action. And we were lucky that giving is actually quite instinctive. There was a study done in Chicago some years ago where they gave everybody in that study $10, and I think they gave them about 10 seconds to make a decision on whether to give to a cause or not. People who were given up to 10 seconds to make the decision overwhelmingly were happy to give. People who took longer to make that decision, after 10 seconds, most of those decided not to give. So from that, they concluded that giving is quite instinctive. So that was one of the things that we learned. The other thing that was incredibly powerful was the relationships. The relationships that we have, the context of those relationships, the strengths of those relationships, is a fantastic predictor of what you care about. It's an amazing predictor of what you're likely to care about as well. I think in the example that I gave earlier when I was talking about a colleague, that's a relationship you have with somebody. And that context of the relationship is, you're working together. And so the last one that we discovered as well, which was also really interesting, is that we could algorithmically stimulate certain hormones. So I'm here speaking specifically about oxytocin through, the trust hormone. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. There's a guy called Paul Zak. He's the love doctor. He talks a lot about this hormone. But the fact that you can use data to stimulate that hormone, which will inspire trust, which can help you remove those barriers to give, is a really exciting prospect. So we took all of those findings, and we essentially built this machine that does 4 key things. The first one is it knows, using all of those techniques that we've talked about, how to keep you engaged with giving content. Really, really exciting. It looks at you as an individual, specific to you, understands you, your relationships, how that hormone will get stimulated for you, and it knows how to keep you engaged, how to keep you interested. Then, it builds an understanding of what's important to you. And I use the word build quite advisedly because we've tried to make this algorithm a little more charismatic than most algorithms, so it doesn't automatically assume it knows everything about you. It actually is humble enough to say, for this particular individual, I don't think I know them very well, so I'm going to have a conversation. So I'm going to start asking them questions. I mean, it's not literally asking you questions, but it's presenting information that can start harvesting more information from the individual. Second, it knows how you want to give. We've made it understand that giving is not just about giving money. You can give sweat. You can, not literally give sweat. Sorry, that's disgusting. You can, you can run. You could, give your time, give energy. There's lots of different ways you can give. It's not purely about money. We all have different ways we can express how we care and what we care about. And then also it knows the right time to ask so that it can maximize the chances of us raising money for the good causes that exist out there. And this is kind of what it looks like. I said it's not a static image. So I told you that in order to make an emotive algorithm, we had to understand people of a system of associations, a system of connections, relationships with everything, relationships with their activities, relationships with other people, the context of those relationships, calculate the strength of those relationships. All of those give you clues, give you signals as to how somebody's feeling at a particular time. And this is, like I said, a static image of something that is constantly moving as we continue to express those feelings. So I can hear the skeptics saying, does that actually work? And we took the traditional methods, let's say, which I said worked better than random, and we compared them to the new machine that I showed you earlier. And we did a test to try and get people to support, I think it was the Syria campaign. The Syria crisis a couple of years ago. And one set of people we did, with recency, frequency, people who lived near Syria. It was a fairly strong amount of intuition that we picked up there. People who had given to a Syrian charity before, people who had given to the charity that was supporting the cause in Syria, and we put them all in there. And the other group, we just let the machine pick. And the machine picked all those individuals, and we found in every instance of that test, the machine was in excess of 91% more accurate and significantly better at picking individuals. It also had a knack of keeping them entertained, unlike the other one, which resulted in huge degrees of opt-outs and people disappearing, a large degree of dissatisfaction. So, guys, as I conclude this talk, really, one of the things I wanted to stress was, as we worked with some other organizations, we found that a lot of organizations were using a lot of data to try and focus on the increasing lifetime value, trying to squeeze money out of individuals. And to some extent, they were working. But in other industries, what we did discover was if we focused on the algorithm on keeping the consumer delighted, on keeping them happy, had a more emotive relationship with that individual, that your lifetime value went through the roof. So as I conclude, I think the message that I want all of us to take away from this is that we should focus on delighting the consumer rather than just trying to extract money from them. Thank you very much, guys. I think we've got a few minutes for questions, if anyone has any questions.
Hi. First, I'd say that's the best talk I've heard so far this week, actually.
Thank you.
I even put down my laptop. Can you correlate, say, actions of giving and stuff with things like what's happening on the television and other kind of events in near real time?
Sorry, you're going to have to say that again.
So, can you look at things like what's happening on television and postings on Facebook and correlate that with people's giving actions?
There is a relationship between those two things, of course. The things we express in Facebook. You have to be careful with the things that we express in Facebook because you have your Facebook self, which in order for us to find out what you really care about, we have to dig deeper than that. You know, there's the Facebook self, the face we present to other people. In this industry, especially in the giving space, it's really hard to take people for their word. You know, so a lot of people, for example, would say, I'm not affected, whenever I give to charity, I'm not affected by what others do. I do it because I want to, and I give the amount that I want. It's really interesting. If they see the donations of other people, they're likely to try and maintain that average. No one wants to be the first cheapskate. So, you know, they will all give more donations than they would have planned to give. So there is that sort of correlation. Did that answer your question? Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where do you get the relationships from? From social networks, for example, or from where?
It's a good question. So our platform actually was social by its nature, and that was accidental. I said most people who use our platform, they would come there, create a fundraising page to say, hey guys, I'm running the marathon, or hey guys, I'm going to sit in a bathtub of beans for a day. You know, people actually do that sort of thing. There was a guy who went to work in a gimp suit every day, for example. Then they create a page and they share that page. Just by virtue of sharing that page, we have a tool that allows you to share it on Facebook or to send emails, and then people come and support you. So there we get an indication of that relationship. But even more so, people communicate with each other. So when they come and put money on that page, when they pledge or they give money to that cause, they usually leave a comment, which is really interesting. And that gives a lot of exposure into the nature of that relationship.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, yeah, this is very inspirational. We were wondering with my colleague if you can maybe give us a short summary of the kind of data sets you were using to feed the algorithm. I mean, I guess there is some basic demographics, but I would like to know, like, you know, is self-reported, behavioral, surveys, etc. Thank you.
If I understood correctly, you were asking what sort of data do we use to feed the algorithm? Yes. So everything. I would say everything we can get our hands on, everything that the user is happy to share with us will be useful. So, is that okay? You'll appreciate I have to be a little discreet about what data we use.
Hi, well, I have actually a non-related question, even though that I'm very much interested in algorithms and all that, but two questions. One for you.
Yeah.
Like you said, when you have the power to actually influencing on people in that matters, why did you choose this in the first place? That's first. And secondary was that it's a personal interest. Well, if you give, oftenly when I think about giving money to charity, I would like to know that it really ends up in the people that or like say the country or whatever, that the causes that I care about, or do they just really disappeared or somebody else took it or something?
That's right. So the first question was, why did we decide to do this?
No,
why did I decide to do this? Oh, okay. Basically, Just Giving is an organization that it's a tech for good company. And the opportunity to work in an area that I'm passionate about, I care about data a huge amount, and also get to do good at the same time, that was a bit of a no-brainer for me, actually. So that was that question. And the second question, can you remind me? Oh, it was about wanting to know where the money went? Was it? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's a really good question. And this is why I was saying giving is so specific and so personal. For you, that's a requirement. Yeah. For you, it's a requirement to understand that the money that you've given has made the impact it stated it had. Yeah. And it's important for the algorithm to be able to understand that. What's really interesting is that for a lot of other people, that's not the case. So some people give because they're actually just trying to form that relationship with their friend, you know. And some people give to show themselves up to other people. They like to appear generous, you know. So there's lots of different reasons that people give and different motivations. And we categorize them into 5 different motivations that people give. And it's important to try and extract that and then get the algorithm to act accordingly.
I appreciate that you can share how you build the algorithms or the data sets that have gone into building them, but then how do you action that into you know, having happier customers and delighting the customers? What channels does the message get delivered through? What type of messages, and how do you approach that?
Yeah. Then? So that's a really interesting question, because when I joined the firm, spent a lot of time digging with the data and found that we could do all of this amazing stuff. The question was, when are they going to see it? You know, so are we just going to email them? Are we just going to, you know, create mail shots or anything like that? And I suppose in the world we live in right now with regards to data, this is a real good example of where data starts to influence the products that you build. So you literally had to build a brand new product in order to support this algorithm. So build a face, effectively, for this algorithm to be able to communicate. So what we've built is we've built a feed. Looks very similar to a feed you'd see on something like Facebook or something like that. And that's where a lot of that interaction takes place. Yeah.
Hello. I'd like to ask about time-based changes. Quite a lot of the talks this week have dealt with how things are and what recommendations you can make. But there are certain known time-based changes that happen. For example, for Just Giving, if you know someone's date of birth and they're 15 and a half, well, you know in 6 months' time they can get a bank card and then they can make a donation. That's an absolute truism. You know, that's not going to change. Can you build in those kind of things? And how do you account for, I think the phrase is charity fatigue, where someone donates now, they don't, in a week's time, someone else catches them the week after, and all of a sudden they say, hey, I'm done, that's me, for 2 years I'm not going to give anything.
Yeah.
How do you handle those kind of things, you know, the time-based changes?
That's a brilliant question. So the first one is a great idea. I hadn't actually thought about that, so thank you for that. We've got some guys from the team here. I'm hoping you make notes on that. The second bit, which is, you're going to have to remind me, sorry, it was a heavy night last night. Charity fatigue. Charity fatigue, yes. This is why delighting has to take that into account. You can't be delighted if we're always pestering you for money, right? So one of the things that we have as an ethos is we're not focusing on extracting money. We're focusing on ensuring that you're still happy to engage. And so that's why we address that issue. And it's really important to ensure that we don't get charity fatigue, you know, and so it is a metric that we look at, definitely, yeah.
Hi. You have a traditional NGO as, let's say, customers or causes, charity causes in Just Giving?
Yeah. Do we have? Yeah. Well, the 20,000 charities are all official charities on the platform. Is that the question you were asking?
Yeah. Well, the fact is that I'm thinking, for instance, I've been contributing to Medical Without Borders, yes, or traditional. And they've got their own ways to get the customers, let's say, yeah, traditional publicity on the street, or people in the street were trying to convince you. Yeah. But I want to know if they're thinking of you guys to attract new people.
Yes, they are. So a lot of causes, so 20,000 is the number now, but that number is growing quite steadily. So a lot of organizations have discovered that we've been blessed with the resources and in excess of 15 years worth of data around this subject. And so it's a bit of a no-brainer to join the platform. So a lot of these organizations are now joining the platform to be able to get donations from there as well.
one more. Thank you. You mentioned a guy spending a day in bathtub full of beans. What's the weirdest challenge you've come across so far?
So the beans, remember the beans one, there's the GIMP suit one, which I remember as well. Guys, do you have any that you remember that are weird?
We've had a few big successes, like the Steve Sutton. I'm not sure if you know that. Basically, it was a teenager who was in hospital, dying of cancer, and he was trying to raise money. It was really popular in the press in the UK, and I can't remember exactly how many millions we raised for it, but it was a lot of money which channeled through our system. Yeah.
I think I remember one guy who decided to stand on one foot for the day or something like that. There's a few of those random things. It'll probably be a good idea to start creating a category of interesting things people do for charity. So we'll make note of that as well. Thank you.
Hi. I was wondering, is it just implemented for giving money or also giving time? Because I know some are just asking for time of people, and is it implemented on how, depending on the situation of the person, how much time they could provide to one company or organization?
So it's not purely about money. Like I said, giving is bigger than that, right? So giving is about money, it's about time, it's about doing some sort of activity. So one of the interesting things of the algorithm is that it looks at each of those individuals to try and understand what's the best thing for that person, or what's the thing they're most likely to do. Because not everybody likes running. And sometimes people get this perception that in order for me to raise money for charity, I have to do the marathon. I've never done the marathon, clearly. But there's other things you can do, and sometimes we just need that little nudge to get exposed that you could do something else. You could just host a dinner in your house, for example, and things like that, so you can raise awareness. So yeah, it's not purely about money. Yeah.
Hi, you have a very powerful and emotive data set.
Yes.
That you could do some really creepy things with it if you chose to. Do you have a formal ethics policy, or how do you handle that?
So I put a slide there on ethics, because ethics is absolutely crucial for us. You can imagine in the business that we're in, the nature of the business that we're in, we would have to be cautious about what we do. We have to ensure that the user is aware of what's taking place, so that it isn't creepy and it isn't untoward, if you like. So do we have an ethics committee? Yes, the management team basically discuss that on a regular basis. It is one of the things that is absolutely key as part of the organization. So. We've actually worked with also a few academics in that space as well, to just try and get an understanding from their perspective what's ethical and what's not. Yeah. Great. Oh.
After you deploy the algorithm and you build the feed into the page, how do you measure success, and how do you keep iterating on it, and how do you keep control checks that it's working and it's still effective?
So one of the key metrics is engagement. We want to make sure that people are interacting and they're coming back regularly. So interestingly, if I asked you how many times have you gone to a website to support a cause, I don't know what that number is, but for most people that number is less than 4 times a year. Whereas now we're building a platform where people are going to engage with that on a monthly basis. They're coming back regularly. They're interested in that content. So we monitor all of those things. You can imagine the amount of click-throughs. That's terabytes of information that we can get from all of those interactions on the site. So that's one of the key metrics. We also get an indication of what they've registered an interest in. The engine has to learn. It's not one algorithm that you deploy and then you let it go. We have to see, are we continuously being able to keep people interested? Is the content that they're being presented with something that they like, or are they showing some degree of dissatisfaction? So we measure all of those metrics as well. And of course NPS, we speak to our users as much as possible to just try and get an indication of how they feel. Right, I think that's, one more.
And just thinking a bit more of the data types, do you think maybe wearable technology can help to unlock further insights from your platform.
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Do you think that wearable technology like tracker bands or
Yes.
the Apple Watch can give more information and pull more insights from your platform?
Absolutely. I think I'm quite excited about what we could potentially get from wearables. The data tells a really interesting story, and they always tell surprising stories. So I saw something, for example, that the distance that you move from your house is a really good indicator of how likely you are to be depressed, right? And so it's little nuggets like that when you start plugging them in, you can begin to understand a lot more about individuals. So when I said everything, if that data is available, absolutely we should try and capture it. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, guys.